Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I am Stephanie Manzelli, Chief People Officer at Employ. Just want to start by saying thank you so much for joining us today as we unpack the 5 biggest findings from our 2025 Recruiter Nation report. Today, we're going to spend about 45 minutes walking through the key takeaways, and we're absolutely going to be leaving time for Q&A at the end. This year's report is definitely a meaty one. I do ask that you don't be shy. We do love engaged audiences, so please drop your questions in the Q&A tab. Share your thoughts in the chat. Be a part of the conversation. We, from time to time, will answer questions organically through the discussion. So don't be shy. Don't be a stranger. I want to kick us off today by welcoming today's panel, who are here to help me dig into the data and share their perspective. So first, I want to introduce you all to Cameron. I'd love to have you introduce yourself.
I'm Ellis. I'm the Talent Engagement Manager for Marcus Corporation. Here I just help oversee and lead some of our strategic talent initiatives and our talent experiences and employment branding for our 2 divisions, Marcus Hotels and Resorts, which has about 16 properties across the US, and then also Marcus Theaters, which is the 4th largest movie theater circuit in the US. So happy to be here and dive through these findings.
We're so excited to have you. And Colton, please take a minute to introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, great to be with you, everyone. My name's Colton Green, and I work at IBM. So I spent some time in IBM's HR function, so it's great to be amongst friends. And I worked on the change management around our digital transformation for our client Zero Success Story, which is just about IBM rolling out its digital solutions internally to optimize its HR function. And now I came over to the client Zero go-to-market team. So I hope clients do the same thing. So it's really, really great to be here with you.
Well, thank you. Surely both of you will have tons of great insight for us. So thanks both for introducing yourself. We are so excited to have both of you here. For anyone who is not familiar with our annual report, I just want to give a quick overview before we dive in. So at Employ, we surveyed more than 1,200 talent acquisition professionals about the current state of recruiting, the challenges that they're facing, the trends that they're seeing, and the investments that each of these various teams are making. The report itself highlights those findings and really offers practical insights to help recruiters shape their 2026 hiring strategies. So before we dig into our first finding, I do want to start with a quick pulse check in the chat. How do you feel about the state of hiring and recruiting today? Is hiring volume holding strong or is it dropping? Are you yourself optimistic about the future? Are you concerned about the future? Would love to have everyone sort of drop their perspective and how you're feeling into the chat. Holding strong. I'm happy to hear it, Lindsay.
Yeah, great to hear.
Holding strong. Our volume is still high. Well, okay, we've got a first couple droppings. More hiring strong. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, this is consistent. All right. Okay. So here's our first hiring, our first finding. Volume's up. This is something we asked this year, get this year's respondents about, and despite the recent headlines about economic uncertainty and hiring slowdowns, 70% said hiring increased over a year. And similarly, 26% anticipate significantly more hires in 2026, while 44% expect somewhat more. So it does seem like recruiters are finding and feeling optimistic about the future of hiring. Colton, I want to start with you. Why do you think that there's a disconnect between the headlines about hiring slowdowns and economic uncertainty and recruiter realities, which we're hearing are increased hiring volumes and optimism?
Yeah. So I think that comes down to really, in my view, it's 3 main factors. So the first being the difference between macro versus micro dynamics. So, headlines tend to focus on more broad macroeconomic indicators like gross domestic product, interest rates, whereas recruiters deal in the micro. You're dealing with different sectors, different regions, and so your experiences might not reflect sort of more broad overarching headlines. I think the second thing is sort of what we saw in the chat there. Applicants are up. Applicant volumes are up. I think that with economic uncertainty looming, that's sort of on everyone's mind. that might drive job seeking behaviors as well. And so with increased candidate volume, I think that can be exciting, and it's an exciting challenge to tackle. And then the last thing too being rising candidate expectations. So, nowadays employees and job candidates are looking for, transparency, flexibility, growth opportunities. They want to grow their skills in this age of AI and automation. And so with that becomes a really exciting opportunity for recruiters and talent professionals. You can tackle this problem in a new and innovative way, in a way that maybe no one's really thought of before. You get to be a trendsetter. And so especially too with the excitement I'm seeing in the chat, and the excitement that I see from the recruiters that I work with, recruiters have a passion for serving others. That's really at the core of the operations there. And so when you have this sort of fast-paced, dynamic environment and new challenge to operate within, I think that can be incredibly exciting and fulfilling. So, headlines are broad indicators. Recruiters are navigating a new environment. And I think that's the sort of the source of the discrepancy there.
I love that last thing that you said, broad concepts, right? And recruiters are the ones that are in the micro. They're navigating the dynamic opportunity. I think that's such a great point for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, and so moving right along, our second finding is candidate quantity versus quality. So in addition to hiring volume being up year over year, 66% also said applicant volume is up. But despite more applicants, candidate quality, 52%, which is up from 46% last year, overtook candidate quality. So that was 47%, and that's down from 57% as a recruiter's top priority year over year. Actually, I want to start with Cameron on this one. Even with more applicants year over year, why do you think that recruiters are still struggling with prioritizing candidate quantity?
Yeah, so I think over the last few years, it's something we definitely tried to find a solution for, and those low application numbers on our open requisitions and increasing that candidate quantity amongst a few other things. But I think the reality here is mostly that volume doesn't necessarily equal fit. For example, we implemented a new product that's part of the employee suite in late fall of 2023, and the number of candidates in our ATS grew by over 200% from 2023 to 2024. And it's still rising, and we're on track to surpass that number here in 2025 at the end of the year. But I think many of these applicants aren't necessarily engaged in the process, and they might not know how many applications they're submitting or which companies they're submitting to. A lot of them actually have very weak follow through too when a recruiter or a hiring manager reaches out to them. And I think some of the candidates also don't, not even some, quite a large chunk of candidates don't meet the requirements for these roles. And so that effective pool of qualified candidates is a lot smaller than these raw numbers are suggesting. And so add to that, there's lots of differing expectations between candidates and employers. And so a high volume of applicants doesn't necessarily translate into strong hires. And so that increase of candidates I just mentioned, it wasn't by accident. It wasn't just because we implemented this new product. Our incomplete applications are lower than they've ever been. But we took a very intentional approach to our candidate journey and our candidate experience. And we started looking at, how applicants were finding us on job boards, how we were showing up on Google, how long our application process was actually taking people, whether it was on mobile or desktop, when we kind of compared those, and the amount of applications I submitted was insane. But we also wanted to see, do you have to create a username and password? And so I think a lot of these process improvements helped quantity and not just quality, which kind of was a good outcome for us. But with that, these things take a very long time and a lot of effort. And so I think most of us recognize that we have limited time and resources to handle these high quantities of candidates, and because tasks like screening and sourcing and scheduling, stakeholder communications, those just consume so much of our bandwidth as recruiters, and our teams just often focus on more of a reactive approach to these requisitions rather than taking that proactive approach and building those pipelines, nurturing those candidates. And so I think we're also spending time managing our systems rather than managing our candidates. And so I think we all want and agree that quality and engagement and building strategic pipelines is super critical. And these process improvements help, but these resource constraints remain. And so I think we all want more candidates, but I think we just recognize that there's other things that are taking precedent and are just more important today. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I think there's a combination of tooling to support you through the process that's really, really critical, and obviously clean, process development that helps find efficiency for your recruiters. But what I think was so fascinating about this quality versus quantity is that it's universal, right? I'm watching the chat light up, and I see lots of people agreeing that the quantities of their applications have increased either through various methods, but the quality is something that is requiring more time and effort. For me, as someone who loves technology, I think what an incredible time to be a recruiter, in the sense that you have this ability to really reintroduce the human element and find that perfect candidate match, while you will leverage technology to help make you more efficient. So this was an interesting finding from my perspective. Okay, finding number 3, budgets and tech investment. So this year's data actually tells us that TA teams have growing budgets, with 67% planning to increase spend in the next 6 to 12 months. This fascinated me. And more than half, at 52%, will be putting those funds towards new recruitment technology. I think this kind of piggybacks off of our last topic. Yeah, and the top area of investment is actually AI recruiting tools. It came in at 67%. So I want to throw this to both of you, Cameron and Colton. I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on what parts of the hiring process have the biggest and best opportunity to be taken over by AI, and what parts really shouldn't go to AI. Colton, why don't we start with you?
Great. Yeah. So, I think it's on every talent acquisition professional and HR professional's mind right now, what parts make the most sense, taking into account, bias detection. And so, I think the biggest upside, exactly like Cameron was mentioning in her section, was, those more logistical administrative tasks, things that are just time consuming in everyone's day, because the intention of AI shouldn't be to use AI for AI's sake. You want to do it to improve not only talent acquisition professionals' lives, but also job candidates' lives, make their experience better throughout the process. And so, thinking about interview scheduling, initial candidate screenings, thinking about, there's a lot of great examples on the slide here, posting job requisitions, writing job descriptions, but then keeping the human in the parts that should be human, so anything that's involving trust or empathy or support, mentorship, crucial conversations. Thinking about too, we've all been there whenever you're going through, a hiring process, you've gotten to the final stage, and then, you just get that rejection letter. It's demoralizing. And a lot of that too, recruiters only have so much time in their day. So it's a function of time, thinking about, your ability to, provide support in those moments that matter, because, most employees, their first interaction with a company is through the recruitment side of things. So you want to be leading with empathy, you want to be leading with kindness. And so, those rejection letters, those moments when you're assessing team fit, you're thinking about cultural fit within the organization and the function they're applying to, and again, keeping the human at the center of your decisions. So when you're thinking about what to move to AI, it's really about thinking about augmenting human skills and then leaving those logistical administrative tasks to AI and automation.
You are singing to my ears. Cameron, what's your perspective on where AI should and shouldn't be used?
I think my answer to this is very similar to Colton's, and keeping human connection central here. We don't want to lose that. Recruiting, we're not dealing with widgets, we're dealing with people. We kind of have to ask ourselves, we want to use AI as an enhancement to our work, not a replacement. So I think it's most effective in areas such as optimizing job postings and making sure that they're engaging and keyword rich, and things that job seekers are actually searching for, and being able to streamline and schedule interviews with hiring managers or other recruiters. It's definitely helpful in that area. Things such as supporting sourcing or helping matching candidates to the right requisitions, those things that take a lot of time and are a little bit tedious, or maybe even something such as conducting candidate research. Indeed launched a new tool early this fall that I think is really interesting and kind of is a good segue into this also. It's called Talent Scout. And so it kind of combines some of their existing products, but it also has a very heavy AI component towards the second half of it. And so you can ask it to analyze one of your positions. And so when I would ask it to analyze it, it would then tell me a little bit about my job, how it's faring in the market and compared to other similar positions in my market, as well as then give me recommendations on how to improve my job based on what other employers are posting and what job seekers are searching for, and then that second half of it, it kind of combines with one of their existing products, like I mentioned, but you can ask it to show you top matches who haven't applied to your job yet. And so it will give you a list of criteria that it pulls from your job description, and you can go through and say, yes, I want to focus on these, or no, I don't want to focus on these, and kind of weight them on how much you want it to focus on those. But then it will return what it thinks are the top matches. But the good part of it is that it will summarize exactly how it conducted that search, and it will tell you, this search came up with this many results, but I think you should try searching in this area, and search proxies with these types of characteristics or in this industry might fare well. And these will yield stronger matches or not strong matches. So I think it's really interesting. And I'm curious to see how other job boards are also going to take, an approach similar to that and integrate more AI into their systems. But when I think about kind of where AI shouldn't take over, like Colton said, it's those decision-making, those judgment calls, those areas where relationship building and candidate interactions, they really rely on that human intuition, and connection here is really key. And again, Colton, I feel like I'm reiterating everything that you just said.
Go ahead.
I think the question is not how AI can do my job for me, but how can AI make me better at my job? And how can I use it to focus and AI to augment my strengths and not automate our value, and ensure that we preserve that human touch in everything HR.
I want to clap at that response from both of you. I think, I echo all of that. I think oftentimes I get asked, where should AI be infused in the recruitment process? And I think that's different for every organization. I think you have to take a look at your entire hiring process, your entire employee life cycle, wipe it clean, figure out where your pain points are and where you need to use technology to optimize the role of the recruiter, the role of a coordinator, whatever role in HR it is. But then that allows the recruiter to do what they do best, which is the intuition, it is the empathy, it is the human connection, the candidate match that is so critical to the success of a new hire post start date. So I think both of your answers are absolutely 100%. I co-sign to all of that. I think, the human element, the human judgment piece is where you really need to leave the person, and you find the ways to find efficiency through your process. We did have a question in the chat, Cameron. Somebody was asking you the name of the tool that you were referencing. I believe you said it was Talent Scout. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I don't believe it's released to all of their customers yet, but I think they mentioned in 2026 it will be. It was mostly for a lot of their customers who went to their conference in early fall.
Gotcha.
Thank you for that. All right. Finding number 4. Here we go. AI is everywhere right now. So it wasn't surprising for us to see that 65% of our respondents use it to augment their recruiting technology. However, something that was really, really, really surprising to me and kind of exciting to see was how top of mind AI governance is. So 49% of organizations already have AI governance policies, and another 38% are piloting them. So what we want to know is does your organization currently have an AI governance policy? And so we're going to launch a poll to ask everybody. And the options are yes, in place and enforced, 2, in development and pilot, 3, no and not planned, and 4, unsure. All right, let's take a look here. I'm going to scroll. No, not planned, in development and piloting, and yes, in place and enforced. I see that climbing up pretty quickly. We're going to give it another second. I love these polls because it gives me such a sense of kind of where our participants are feeling and helps us guide the conversation a little bit. All right. So it does look like the overwhelming majority either have them in development and are piloting them, or they are in place and in force, which makes my heart very, very happy. Okay. So as we move forward, Colton, it's clear that using AI responsibly is becoming a must-have.
Yep.
And I would love to understand, what are some of the key governance practices or frameworks that you think TA teams should be adopting to use AI safely and effectively as they go through their implementation journey?
It's a great question. I think it's like you mentioned, it's on everyone's mind right now. I think, it starts with what principles you want to uphold with your governance framework. So thinking about things like transparency, observability, explainability. It's not sort of a black box approach where you don't know what the AI is actually doing or how it's making its decisions. Whenever your AI is transparent, you're forthcoming with the information that you're using, you're forthcoming with your decision-making processes, thinking about how it's observable, you can see the decisions it's making and what data it's using, and then explainable. For folks like me, I'm a non-technical user of AI. And so, whenever I'm thinking about, where, governance makes the most sense within the talent acquisition process, I want to make sure that I understand, how AI is being used for my job and how it affects me. And so then from there, after you sort of have the principles that you want to uphold, you're thinking about implementing defined oversight. So assigning roles within talent acquisition for AI governance, and then implementing an AI ethics board that not just for HR, but that is for across the organization. Then from there, you're thinking about risk management. So making sure you're keeping up with all the proper ethical, legal, and compliance risk. It seems like every day there's a new technology coming out. There's a new large language model that's being released, thinking about how those are used, thinking about their applications, making sure you're staying up to date. And then governance takes place in perpetuity. It's not just sort of a one-time, you implement your platform, you think about the governance principles, and then you just kind of let it be. It's a ongoing process of making sure that, you're thinking about undetected bias. You're thinking about documenting things thoroughly and then auditing your uses and your platforms regularly to make sure that, again, it's explainable, observable, and transparent.
I love that. I also, as you were talking, I was thinking, well, that must mean I should really evaluate through my selection process of technology what the vendor itself offers me in terms of safety and in terms of some guidance from a governance perspective. I absolutely agree with everything you said. It's kind of like, you go to the doctor once a year for a checkup, or do you want to partner with an organization that supports you, every single day and calls your attention to places in the process where there might be some improper use. I did see in the chat, Keith in the chat mentioned that they have seen a few hiring managers actually trying to leverage AI to make actual hiring decisions. So they're adding things like interview notes and job descriptions and candidate resumes, and then asking AI, should I hire this candidate? The answer is no, you should not do that.
That's a can of worms right there. Yeah, I don't know about that one.
No, that doesn't work. Okay, great. So finding number 4 as we move forward. AI use cases. So in addition to the rise of AI governance, another evolving trend that we're seeing is around AI use cases. So last year, the top use case was candidate matching. But this year, that actually dropped about 15 percentage points to 40%, which is down from 55. Meanwhile, some use cases increased year over year, like writing job descriptions. That went up to 41%, and sharing communications, another 41%, and then creating recruitment marketing content, which was 39%. So Cameron, switching over to you, why do you think that we're seeing this evolution of AI use cases, and what, if anything, does it say about AI concerns and fear?
I think most of us in TA and HR are cautiously curious about AI. I think we tend to put more emphasis on experimentation and learning before we fully adapt anything. It's kind of just like starting with those small baby steps, beginning with something like job content creation or candidate communications, they're relatively low risk tasks. So they kind of allow us to experiment, learn, see the value before we integrate anything into our daily routines. But the issue kind of with this too is that, all of these outputs that you receive from AI, they need to be reviewed for accuracy. If you throw something in for a job description and say, make this sound better, more concise, or reduce the number of bullets. You have to make sure it's not putting in random words or removing words, and making sure that it's just accurate. Another part of that is human tone. You want it to actually sound like you or someone at your company. If you don't know how to use an M dash or any of that, definitely adjust your settings and make sure that you're using it so it actually helps you and your outputs and not somebody else's. And that kind of also leads me to making sure that it aligns with your brand and your employment brand. And you don't want it to sound like another organization. You want it to sound like yours. And so I think TA is kind of approaching it kind of how people did when smartphones came out. People started with those small, simple tasks, sending emails, using it for GPS, and they kind of noticed how it had an impact on their lives. But they did all of this before anybody would have thought of trusting it with something like their banking information or their health information. I mean, how many people nowadays walk around without a wallet because they trust that their phone has their card on it and they can tap to pay whenever they're at the grocery store or anything like that. So I think TA is kind of taking a similar approach for these early AI use cases, writing job descriptions, crafting social media posts, communicating with candidates. They're all low risk and contained. So it helps us explore AI's capabilities and limits and build our confidence in technology. And it can help us prepare our teams for those more complex applications, maybe something like candidate screening in the future or conducting performance evaluations. But it allows us to take just more of a gradual approach to this. And I think we're curious and optimistic about AI, and eager to innovate. But I think we're also deliberate and thoughtful. I believe most of the people on this call are HR professionals or TA professionals, and I think most of us are in this profession for a reason, and it's part of our nature to be deliberate and see how things work before we kind of just jump in. And so prioritizing our focus more so on accuracy, authenticity, and trust will help us adopt AI as part of our routines, but I think this gradual approach is helpful in this case.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's such a great way to look at it too, to be honest. Okay, so as we move forward to our finding number 5, analytics. For TA teams, being able to report on business impact and ROI is really important, but it can also be a challenge. We saw in this year's data that most teams are tracking efficiency metrics like cost or time to hire or recruiter activity. However, the data they see as most valuable is more impact oriented, things like retention rate of hire and quality of hire. I'm really interested in both Cameron and Colton's perspective on this. What metrics do you think are most valuable, and how do you use them to tie recruiting efforts back to overall business results and value creation? Cameron, let's start with you.
When evaluating recruiting efforts, we tend to focus on metrics that capture both efficiency and quality. So I think the ones that are most valuable to us at this time are candidate applicant and the flow of that, the quality of the talent pool that we're hiring, the source and channel effectiveness, the candidate's overall experience, if that's, drop-off rates, click rates, how far people are making it in our application process, and then also retention. I think all of these metrics, and especially combined, provide us a holistic view of our recruiting performance, and they can help show us those overall business results. I saw time to fill on this slide here. I think that's one that is less heavily weighted in our eyes nowadays, just because we recognize that there's lots of variables and factors that go into this whole process, and we don't necessarily feel that it is the best measure of effectiveness of our recruiters. But it's still interesting to see that it's up there. When thinking about the impact of focusing on these metrics, an example I think I would provide is that process I mentioned earlier of reviewing our candidate experience and that job board placement, our application experience. Doing all of that, we simultaneously reduced our recruitment advertising spend by over 63% in our first year, and we're still continuing to see it decrease, which It's really great for us because we can then focus those efforts somewhere else, but we wouldn't have even gotten there had we not gone through all of those steps of evaluating our existing process. I think these also will help us in the future improve things like our operational service and retention when used correctly. I think these also can lead to other broader organizational benefits, and they can help free up hiring managers and HR leaders' time so that they can focus on other things like developing and engaging and supporting teams, which in turn can drive growth, satisfaction, and profitability. And for those of you with integrated systems, things like succession planning and performance management, all of that can help paint a full picture and tie those metrics to your overall organizational success.
I love that. I love that. I think, a lot of people think of HR outside of HR as point in time activities. Okay, now I'm going to do my performance review, or now I'm going to engage with a TA for, to recruit for this vacant role. But realizing that actually it's cyclical, right? It's one big cycle, and you cycle in and out of the bits and bobs as part of your overall talent, your talent cycle. I think is such a great way to look at it, because it's true. It's not point in time activities. They feed into other things like succession planning, performance management, just like the full recruitment process altogether. It drives organizational success for sure. Colton, what is your perspective on the best metrics for proving TA's ROI and business impact?
Yeah, so I think I'd echo a lot of what Cameron said. I think she did a really good job of sort of emphasizing the key points to look at. What I think about too is tying it to business outcomes. So at IBM, we think about three sort of main factors that play into an HR digital transformation, which are compliance, cost efficiencies, and consumer grade experiences. And I think one of the ones that applies here very directly is consumer grade experiences, which is just about, again, curating the things that you're measuring and the experiences that you're having towards the needs of your employees and towards the needs of your job candidates. So thinking about things like net promoter score, not only for your recruiters, but also thinking about it for the candidates that are applying to roles, to actually make sure that you're sourcing the proper needs and you are thinking about the end user as the prism of judging your sort of metrics and your AI automations through. And these things, again, don't take place in a void. They're affecting real human lives. And so that's more the point that I wanted to make, is keeping those consumer grade experiences in mind, and then making sure that you're linking it to business outcomes as well.
I love that. That's a great perspective. Okay. I fibbed. I said we were going to go over 5 findings, but actually we're throwing in a bonus finding. So as we move forward, I want to talk about our 6th finding, which was skills-based hiring. This year's data shows that skills-based hiring is becoming more widespread, with 91% of teams now using this practice. And these teams are also reporting some pretty incredible benefits, including better candidate quality. So 65% responded with that. Faster hiring, 51%. Stronger diversity, 48%. And improved internal mobility, reskilling at 48%. That last one, tried and true for employee. We focused on that this year, and we saw it pay off in dividends. But I'd love to get a quick pulse from everyone on the call. If your team has adopted skills-based hiring, what benefits have you seen most clearly? So if everyone who's listening in wants to take a minute to respond to this poll, the options are better candidate quality, faster hiring, stronger diversity, improved internal mobility, or something else entirely. Better candidate quality is astoundingly the leader right now. We're seeing some faster hiring make headway. This is my favorite part of hosting webinars. I just love running the polls. Great. All right. It does seem overwhelmingly 73.3% of you are responding better candidate quality, with faster hiring about 10% behind. Great.
It's a big sample size too. It's really exciting.
I know. It's nice. Great. All right. Cameron, would love to kind of volley it over to you. What are some ways that you've seen this approach improve outcomes in practice? Are there any learnings for other teams looking to find similar success?
I think success when it comes to skills-based hiring, it really depends on the role that you're looking at as well as the industry. So many of our properties in our portfolio already use some sort of skill-based hiring in their approach for their high volume hourly roles. And so, I mentioned our properties where we have lots of hotels and resorts and also movie theaters. And so in these roles, like number of years of experience as a front desk agent isn't necessarily applicable when it comes down to can this person effectively deal with a customer who's irate or a guest who had a really bad experience. Can they handle that? Are they able to engage with them in a professional manner and also resolve it quickly so that they leave satisfied? That typically doesn't always come out in a normal interview process, and so it's a bit easier to try it in this type of high volume hourly roles, but we're not quite there yet for all of our management positions. I think it's an area where organizations tend to struggle in general. With internal talent, it tends to work a little bit better just because their skills, their abilities, their interests, they're already known. On the contrary, with external talent, there's often a greater hesitation to take risks just because of fear of the unknown. I think companies often aren't prepared to invest in training and development in order to take this skills-based hiring approach. But this approach requires a thoughtful plan and a process in order to be successful. And so, I think some key components for success here are that, there has to be training, and that training has to be accurate, it has to be relevant, and it has to be scalable. Another part of that is management ready for this? What is the strength of their current team? Is that manager able and willing to coach and upskill their new hires? I think leaders also have to be prepared to recognize skill gaps on their team and adapt quickly. And so I think skills-based hiring can be sustainable and effective, but only if there's training and process and management support in place.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We just had a question in the chat that skills-based hiring has been around for 30 years, and I think that's absolutely true. It has been. I think we are getting crisper on what it truly means to skills-based hire, experientially, developmental capability, hiring for roles that don't even exist yet, looking 5 years down the road and looking at what those transferable skills are. I think it's just an evolution of the recruitment process. And despite the incredible benefits of skills-based hiring, some teams are still facing adoption hurdles or roadblocks. And I think, what we did see from this year's survey is that respondents told us one of the biggest challenges was difficulty assessing and measuring skills in a fair and consistent way.
Yeah.
So looking over at you, Colton, how can we use technology, particularly AI and structured interview tools, to help us standardize things like skills assessments and help us evaluate candidates more consistently and without bias?
Yeah, so I think the value there really is in the ability to manage or to measure skills objectively. So you're able to apply these consistent benchmarks that can be applied across contexts, across the enterprise. You can have sort of a centralized database of the insights that you're leveraging that not only can be applied for certain roles, but then, it evolves to a broader framework, thinking about, how to think about sourcing the KSAOs that we're really looking for going forward, thinking about adapting to candidates' background and experiences. A great use case that comes to mind for me for AI is sort of an interview coach. Something that proactively, whether it's in person or virtual, that can proactively sort of nudge you on, considering, points of emphasis, thinking about questions that need to be asked, thinking about making sure that the questions you're asking are, again, standardized and consistent. Because bias really comes into play when you fall into this sort of subjective thinking about, this is a question that came to mind, this is something that I've been interested in, just because, we all bring our own experiences, not only on the job, but just personally to every interaction that we're in. And so leveraging AI is inherently objective because of the protocols that we mentioned with governance, because you're using it in ethical use cases that are founded in data. That is how you standardize across the process. So that way, again, humans come into play for those empathetic conversations, support, mentorship, and then AI can help you streamline the process.
Yeah, Absolutely, 100% agree. And our chat's been a little blown up on this one, so just want to clarify for everyone. Skills-based hiring is hands-on experience, compared to things like traditional credentials, certifications, degrees from institutions. So that's really what skills-based hiring means: potential opportunity, transferable skills, things of that nature, non-traditional candidates, etc. Okay. All right. So I wanna move us forward to share some key insights. Before we head into the Q&A, I really would like to go around the panel and hear one actionable takeaway from both of you. Based on the data and the insights that we discussed today, what is one thing recruiters should prioritize or start doing now that can help them strengthen their 2026 strategy? I'll let you pick who goes first.
Cameron, I'm gonna flip to you.
Okay.
Surprise, right?
I would say definitely if you have the time, or if you don't, maybe find a way to make the time, but to sit down and kind of just really evaluate your current and existing process today from both the employer side and the candidate side, and see kind of where some of those those pain points are, and see if there's an area to implement some sort of AI into it. Or if you can't and it's not you don't have one of those governance policies like Colton was mentioning, or your company just isn't quite there yet, or there isn't funds for it, what is another way that you could maybe help the candidate or your recruiters, and just really evaluating all of those steps in the process, I think is definitely key in 2026, and then also moving forward as well.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say basically the same thing in a different way, I think. I think it really starts with leading with empathy. I see that with the leaders that I interact with, both internally and externally. The people who are adopting well in the AI age are leading with empathy. They're thinking about, their end user. They're thinking about the employees that they have, working with them, to, optimize their experiences through AI. Again, it's not AI just for AI's sake. You're actually trying to improve lives with it, which starts by, again, the framework that I mentioned would sound like a broken record, but compliance, cost efficiencies, and consumer grade experiences. Start with the empathetic point of view. And then when you get realistic about, is this driving cost savings for the company? Are we complying with all of the new and evolving regulations? And then how is the experience for our end users? When you keep those things in mind and take the empathetic and supportive approach, that's the thing I've seen be the most successful. And that's what I would leave everyone with today.
Great. Love that. I think you were both very eloquent in your replies to that question.
Thank you.
We're actually going to transition into Q&A. We'll have a couple extra minutes for Q&A, and we have a ton of questions that have come in. So bear with me as I navigate this screen and kind of volley it to both of you. All right. Cameron, I think this one's for you. How are companies partnering and collaborating with industry organizations to access more diverse talent pools?
Great question. I think kind of what I mentioned before, like it depends on the types of roles you're recruiting for and the industries that you're in. I mean, I think we tend to focus more so on those local organizations. We have members of our recruiting teams on all of the local boards. In Milwaukee, where I'm based, there's an organization called Employ Milwaukee, and part of their mission is to help find jobs for those who are unemployed or underserved in the community. And so, they also partner with the Department of Labor and try to get grants. So sometimes they'll approach employers with a really great candidate and say, we'll actually pay for this person to work with you, or they might not have this certain certification, maybe something such as like a SurfSafe certification, which oftentimes you need to work in a hospitality environment, and so they'll actually pay for that person to go and get that certification or certificate and skills so that they are able to then enter your workforce and be part of your organization. So I think finding those local just groups who are willing to work with you, and what their mission is they want to help people get jobs. And so I think it's really important for us to also work with them and communicate with them and be on those boards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, it can become overwhelming very, very quickly. There are so many organizations that you can partner with. I think the first step is taking a look internally and defining what your version of diversity is, right? And I think it looks different based on the function, based on the department, based on so many different variables that are so unique to your company. But once you sit down and do that bit of a mind map of what are those diverse organizations, or sorry, what are those talent pools that I wanted to dive into, then you have the ability to sort of narrow down and hone in on what's going to create the most value for your organization. For us as a company, one of the things that we wanted to invest additional effort into was finding female identifying STEM talent and engineering talent in particular. And so for us, we then double clicked into organizations that could support us on that mission as well. So it's unique for every person what diversity, or, I'm sorry, for every organization what diversity means to them, for sure. I think this one is for both of you. So as tech handles more efficiency tasks, what uniquely human qualities do you think will define great recruiters in the years ahead?
Cameron, you want to go? You want me to?
You can go first this time.
I think it's really going to be soft skills. I mean, I think that's always been the case, but then going forward, AI is going to really cut through the fat, I think, in a lot of things, especially some of the more logistical things. It's going to be able to streamline your data. Having it under an orchestration platform can also make it much easier for you to access your data. But then, what's going to be the differentiator from there is going to be your ability to interact with others, the kindness that you show, the support that you show, because, again, when you're interacting with a recruiter, it's your first interaction with a company. People are very nervous. They might not put their best foot forward, but if you're coming in with, warmth and grace for others, then you can give people a platform that they're actually able to show their stuff and be their best self, which I think is really how you, be great at anything, but especially in recruitment.
Yeah, I think I would echo that, and the empathy part. AI can't build a genuine connection with a person and build trust or really be authentic. I mean, it can give you a nice answer, but that's not like authentic. A real recruiter also has to rely on their emotional intelligence as well. They're the ones who can understand a candidate's motivations, their concerns, their goals, and they're the ones who can then negotiate with them, push them to a decision that's maybe a little bit better for them, or tell them to take a step back. AI can't do that. They can give you kind of that cookie cutter answer, but really that's where recruiters shine, because, they know how to deal with people, whereas AI is not trained to do that.
Yeah, I think you're both absolutely right. I just saw this question come through, and I'm actually really excited about it. We're in the middle of an AI technical avalanche where there is a tool for anything, but we don't have a tool for everything. How would you advise leaders that are trying to figure out how to prioritize tool selection in a fragmented landscape? I have a thought here. I'll jump in with this one and then volley it to the team. I think it goes back to your own recruitment process. I think there are many organizations out there that will try and tell you what you need and what problem that they're going to solve for you. But I think what you have to do is look inward at your own team, and you have to document. It does sound painful, but you have to document out your entire recruitment flow, from identifying that there is a need, whether that's through the annual planning process or just magically pops up through attrition, all the way through to hiring somebody. And then you, as a leader in partnership with your talent acquisition team, your CHR, whoever it is, need to identify where those pain points in your process are, or where you can find efficiency. That is where you should look to invest first. You should look to solve your own unique challenges versus the challenges that are articulated to you from the market. That's what we've done internally. It's what I always advise people to do. It's really important that you know your own business, and not just on the HR side, but the pain points from a hiring manager as well, the pain points from a candidate as well, and you solve for those versus just picking something because the marketing was great.
Great.
Yeah, I think even when we were looking at products a few years ago, we weren't necessarily looking for AI, because I don't think it was totally something that was on our radar yet when we first started this process. But we grab people from all of our different locations because we have a very decentralized approach to recruiting. And so we wanted to make sure all of the voices and perspectives were being heard because we thought we knew what we needed and kind of where our holes were. But when we engaged those other subject matter experts from our field, I mean, they were really eye-opening on what they were bringing to the table and what they thought we should focus on. So I think obviously you don't want too many people involved in the process, but you also want to make sure that you have the right amount and people who actually have ideas and want to make improvements. So making sure the right people are at the table as well.
Yeah, I think too from there. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just saying, great point.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I absolutely agree with the point about the analyzing your process flows, looking at your information architecture, and then from there, looking at a platform that sort of, not only streamlines your data, but also minimizes the number of tools you have, the vendors you work with, something that you can have sort of a singular layer that employees come to for their needs. Because when you have to go to all these different tools, all these different vendors, it can become, like you mentioned, very cumbersome, very complicated. But when you actually streamline your tools so they sit under one, again, orchestration layer, that's where you're actually able to derive value and let your systems speak to each other.
Great. Cameron, I think this one is for you. What's the best method for talking with passive candidates who may not know they're interested in a move?
I think for us on our websites, and both of them, we have a whole section that dedicates said interested, but you don't know where, or you want to raise your hand. And we also frame the language in that we'll help you find what it is. So we have our talent network set up so that we have people submit kind of what location they're interested in, what types of hours they're interested in or able to work. If they're interested in certain departments, we can have them fill that out. From there, our recruiting team can then go back and perform our searches in our CRM. We can pull down those key skills. We also opt a lot of these people into email campaigns so that they get regular communications from us and saying, we think you might be a good fit for this. Have you thought about it? If not, and if we typically don't get a response, sometimes we'll have a recruiter reach out and see if they're interested. If not, great, we'll note that on their profile and say, don't contact this person for this type of role. But I think it really is just saying, we're here to help you. We want to help you find a job because, you took the time to express interest in us. So the least that we can do is express some sort of interest in you as well.
We do something very similar. Lots of drip campaigns, lots of targeted messaging through recruitment marketing. Just staying engaged with people, let them know what's happening within our organization and why, they may have transferable skills. We do a lot of that. Great. Okay. All right. Okay, this one, Cameron, this is also for you. What metrics or early signs should leaders look for to know if their recruiting tech investments are actually paying off?
I think looking at usage from like your recruiters or your teams isn't necessarily the most effective. And I think that's one that I was also learning, and it kind of took me a while to get there too. But I think, really focusing on those areas, are we attracting stronger applicants? Is our candidate experience improved? Is our drop-off rate as high as it was before or as low? Which part of our process are we seeing the most engagement from? And our email campaigns, how many people are actually opening those emails? And if not, how do we evaluate that? And so I think it's really just looking at all of those metrics and doing it continuously and not just kind of as one-offs, but also recognizing that you have to still adapt as these things come in and just assume just because you implemented it that it's perfect and you can just move on. But using all of those insights to make those data-driven decisions, it's crucial here.
Yeah.
Colton, would you add anything to that?
I couldn't say it better myself, I don't think.
Somebody clapped in the chat, so I think everyone agrees. Okay, I'm sorry, Cameron. I got another one for you. How can we better through candidates when the quality of the candidate is low within the tech and consulting industry? Or what can we as recruiters do better to source high quality candidates in an unstable economy?
I'm not in the tech and consulting industry, so I think a lot of my experience will come kind of from a lot of this high volume. But some of it I think is still transferable is, using all of your resources. Have you explored all of them? Have you gone out to every single resume database? Have you reached out to people? What kind of messages are you sending? Have you run it through a system that will tell you if it's an effective message or not? Are you just saying, hi, do you want a job? Like, no, nobody's really going to click on that in their email. They want to, hear their name in it. They want to see why they're a good fit, but they also want to see why your company is interesting and engaging, because that will help get them there. We also have lots of tools, with Indeed or LinkedIn, or with, we use telemetry, which is one of JobVite's products. And so going through that entire resume database as well and connecting these, also using a lot of those local resume databases. And so we get that through a product called Circa. And so always making sure we exhaust all of those lists before we try doing more outside work, maybe going through a recruiter for those kind of niche areas.
Great. I'm just scrolling through these questions, see if there's anything else in here. If anybody has any additional questions, please, by all means, pop them in the chat. We have time for one more. Okay. Well, in the meantime, while we wait to see if anybody has any additional questions, if we could reshare our slides, I just want to go through a couple of closing takeaways. Before we let you all go, I do just want to let everyone know, please be sure to check out the Docs tab for the full Recruiter Nation report and a blog post that the organization pulled together with some reflections and some takeaways from this year's data. You're also going to notice one last poll popping up. And while everyone responds to that poll, I just want to thank you to our panelists and frankly to our audience for joining us today. We know you took time out of your workday to listen to us, go through some results, and hopefully share some ideas with you for how you can focus your 2026 recruitment strategy. We hope that there were actionable insights in there, and we just thank you for joining us, and thank you to Colton and Camera and as well. For being with us today. I hope everyone goes off into their Wednesday with great mindset, great attitude, and enjoys the afternoon. Thank you so much.